Hey, it's Chris Liege of Games. So, this is Veiled Fate, latest from IV Games. What do you need to know about it? How does it adapt? How does it do things new on the social deduction side of things, trying to bring a more strategic element? Does it succeed? How does it do overall? What do you need to know to find out whether or not this is right for you? Let's talk. Let's do this. Now, the problem you may run into on any particular game night is a plethora of players. And what do you do when you have a plethora of players, right? You're trying to look for a game that is going to accommodate everyone without necessarily always being a party game. That is one of the most common requests I see across board game forums everywhere. And Veiled Fate is an attempt to look at a deduction-based strategy game done in a different way from IV Games, and they have attempted to do it from a 2 to 8 player scenario driven system where you're just getting a little bit more information to hopefully make it a little bit less than an accusation fight. So the question is, with the little red book here that is the rule book, with the over deluxeified version of miniatures and cubes and storage that goes along with all of the IV Games, does it succeed in its mission? Well, that's a little bit of a mixed bag, and this is what you need to know about it. You're taking a circular-based system where you are maneuvering from one area to another, and you have no particular agent at your disposal, but you're able to manipulate any of said agents on the board, causing chaos and confusion to which one is actually the one that you want to succeed versus the ones that you're just kind of messing with to mess with other players, right? And that's where the dynamic both succeeds and runs into its own limitations. Here you can see what a little bit of the setup looks like and these elements that they are trying to bring together in harmony. And to be fair, it's a very difficult issue when you have this many moving parts, because part of the simplicity of social deduction games is what makes them so appealing, and therein lies both a strength of this as well as part of the problem. The strength of this is that there are so many ways that you can have control, or you can try and mitigate some of the randomness or the chaos that often goes with these games. You have your quest cards around the outside that you're basically getting to choose where you want to place your hero, with some limitations being either the type of hero that they are, or sometimes you'll even see one of the colors over here in this situation. So it only benefits that character, and you can see both the bonus or the detriment that you're going to get on either side, which affects the little pieces of your scoring that are used to keep track of around the edge, and that is the scoring mechanism there. Now, I screwed it up, and it's not actually in order, but if you ignore that for a second, you get to the point where you see that if you go into a new area, one of these pieces moves to the front of the line, which you're sort of used to in those situations, but you're also not. Now, if you get moved out of an area, if you lose an area or lose a point, you move to the front of that location no matter who else is in there. And so that's a very important mechanism that gets utilized. Then, when all of these spots are filled up, going back to this, so if you have, say, all 3 of these in here, then each time one of these characters is put in, you get to cast a secret vote, hence more of the social aspect of things. Either a feather, a scorpion, or a double. Now, it can be a nothing, it can be a 2, randomly draw 2 off the top of the deck, but most of the time it's going to be one of the other ones. And so what you're going to be doing is utilizing that to see which one of these benefits is scored based on this. Now, to mitigate that, then, you also have age cards, one of 3 age cards that are going to happen at the end of the age, depending on what happens, a global vote in this case. Or you have a city card, so you have a city in the center that is allowing you to mitigate each time a person goes in there, you get this specific benefit or detriment with whatever character or person that moves through there. So again, the symbology is relatively straightforward. This means you're flipping the coin that comes with it, and white happens with this, and if black happens, well, that happens there too. So it's got a lot of elements that you're dealing with all in one, not to mention even the god powers themselves, apart from just moving from one place to another and putting these characters on the board or the quests themselves. You have these 5 different powers you're trying to keep track of, and that's more of the issue, is, like I said, the simplicity that these games bring. It's that there is a meta that is needed, there is a meta that evolves, but having to keep track of this plus this, plus this, plus this, plus the special areas in terms of the pools, and then the abyss over here, and how you move from one to the other, and what happens when you move to this one, and what happens when you move to this one, and what refreshes, and what abilities are gained. And that's just a lot of stuff to do. And it's a lot of stuff to keep track of, especially when the whole gist of the party deduction game is, knowing and memorizing and, thinking through what's out there. Now, again, these are great aids, these are great cards, and there are plenty of quests in the terms of the variability of what can happen in terms of the coloring, and the 2 here, 1 there, the type of character there. That is not an issue in terms of the variety, the plethora. There are plenty of age cards, 1, 2, and 3, where you're never going to have a same duplicate set. And then there's plenty of city cards that you're going to be running through that all are slightly different, and it depends on, what happens when they move in. Not only the bonuses, the directions that you're going to go, but also the actions that actually happen in the city and the top as well. So there's not an issue with a lack of things to do. And don't get me wrong here, I really like what this is doing, because you also only have so many actions, and so refilling your hand of these secret blind bidding cards become very important, because if you don't have any of these in your hand, well, you're out for the round. So then your actions are relatively limited. So going to some of those other areas, like the city in the middle, to get some of those draws of these is actually very beneficial, because these carry over from round to round. So in case you don't want to, spend all of your influence based on other people already mitigating things out of your control, well, then hold on to them, because your chance will come. But there are so many moving parts, there are so many players in this game, that especially at the higher player counts, it's tough to keep track of all of those. It's tough to keep track of all 5 powers of who might be able to do something to mitigate or to influence your character, because you're dealing with anywhere from 4 to 7 other people that you're trying to keep track of in the 5 different powers. And, which one did they really want to influence? Because on your turn or on your rounds, you may be influencing, 3 or 4 even other players. So which one is really the one that you want to get, when 2 of them you helped increase the score of, and 2 of them you hope decrease the score of? And keeping track of that, again, like I said, with 3, 4, or 5 other people. You might as well get your scratch pad out for, Search for Planet X, because that's what you're going to need to do. And when I play a social game like this, I don't really want to have to keep track of that on a written piece of paper, right? The rules seem a little bit overwhelming, but it does flow smoothly with these mechanics once you actually get to the play. So the play itself is not bad, but it runs also a little bit on the longer side for a social deduction type of game. These games tend to be, the whole point of them is that you get through repeated plays, so you develop that meta. But this is a game where you could be easily playing it at a higher player count for 1 to 2 hours, depending on, how fast people move. Now, 2 hours is extreme. I would probably say an hour to an hour and a half if you play at anything 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just because how much thinking is your group going to have? And this has the potential for a deduction game where we don't see it do other things similarly in other realms, where you get a little bit of analysis paralysis potentially if you have people in that situation. Pros and cons here. The high of the interactions and the manipulation is smooth. The complexity is not too big, and it works well together, like I said. The cons, as I mentioned, a little bit lengthier, potentially can overstay its welcome a little bit, and keeping track of so much for so many people, it just really can't be done. And the whole point of making this more of a deduction game was so that you can actually deduce. And it's just too much to deduce to actually give you the feeling of control at times at those higher player counts. At the lower player counts, it's pure chaos, because it just depends on how you want to influence things. Is it fun? Yeah, it's fun. But it may not be for you, depending on what you're looking at based on those issues. Is it a step up? Absolutely. Is it well designed? Great. Is it well produced? No questions asked. Is it awesome to have this secret identity card that works really well to surprise it on other people, to have absolutely no clue at the end of the game who other people were? Yeah, it's kind of fun to be like, oh man, I thought you were him, and oh, I thought you were her, and I thought you were this one, and just be totally wrong. At the same time, if you actually are looking for more of a true deductive game, this is going to frustrate you more than anything else. So buyer beware from that aspect. At the same time, you have to be aware that some of those things I showed you on some of these cards, where you have some of these symbols right here, it's coming down to a coin flip. And how do you feel about leaving it from a deduction game standpoint, potentially, to a little bit more chaos that comes with this very, very nice metal coin? Or cardboard one, depending on what version you have. That's the other aspect that you need to be aware of when it comes to either you getting a bonus or a boon, or a benefit versus a consequence, a detriment. And that is potentially the difference between you winning the game and losing the game. So, that is Veiled Fate. It's a fun game, don't get me wrong. It is definitely the next step up in terms of more of a social party game. So if you are tired of the normal stuff, you can check this out. But you just need to know what you're getting into when it comes to this, and whether or not those things that I said are going to appeal to people in your group that are looking for something a little bit more, or if it's not going to appeal to them because there's maybe a little bit too much going on too. Ultimately, a very interesting test. IV Games does an absolutely fantastic job from the production standpoint. That cannot be said enough. But ultimately, whether or not this game is right for you, well, hopefully this will either help you shelf it or ship it. So there you go. That is Veiled Fate. Everything you need to know. As always, let me know what you think. Let me know what was helpful. Let me know what else you'd like to see in the future. And as always, if you haven't, thumb it, comment down below on anything else, and give me a subscription. Trying to get to 10K by the end of the year. Thanks, guys. See you around. Stay classy.